What's going on, guys? Welcome back to yet another episode of Vaughn Coleman Presents. And I'd like you guys to make sure, if you haven't already, to hit that like button, subscribe. And without further ado, let me bring in my guest, Joshua Derstine. How you doing? Jeez, my words
Hey, how's
today.
it going?
It's going well, man. So you are 18 and you already have your first comic out, and your art is unbelievable. I remember, I think I first saw. Were you posting art in 2017?
I don't know. It's been a while. I got on Twitter 3 years ago, but I've been posting on my Instagram for a while. So,
Because I think, if I remember correctly, that um if I remember correctly, you you posted like a Spider-Man thing, right? I'm
yeah.
trying to pull it up. Yeah, I think I do remember that going. Didn't it go kind of viral?
A little bit. Yeah.
I think I do. One thing I will say, I want to pull off right off the bat because I love this on your Twitter, is right here. I love that it's like uh 90s extreme style is not going to get you hired, I'm afraid. And then this 18-year-old comic artist who's 90s extreme style got him hired. That's so
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
It's so good, man. So did you who hired you to start? Like how'd you get started?
Dan Fraga actually, he gave me a gig on Black Flag, so I was doing some Rascal for him.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, now I'm doing my own thing and it's going pretty well. So,
That's awesome. I met Dan a few weeks ago, hung out with him 2 weekends in a row. He's a great guy.
oh, that's awesome. Yeah, he's awesome.
I didn't know you worked with him. That's great.
Yeah, he saw my stuff on Instagram. He texted me and said, "Hey, would you be interested?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" Um,
That's awesome, man.
so yeah.
So what got you into comics to begin with?
Um, well, I actually wasn't a big comic book reader until a few years ago. But the main thing, I don't know if you've heard of like ZHC.
VHC.
ZHC, I don't know. He used to
ZHC. I don't
do
know.
he used to do comic book videos. Now his videos are really stupid. I mean, in my opinion, he's just like a Mr. Beast ripoff now. But he used to do comic book themed videos, and he was very heavily influenced by David Finch at that point. So that was sort of like my little gateway drug into what comics could look like and how cool they could be. So from him, obviously, I got into David Finch when 2020 came up and COVID, and Dave started his channel up. I was watching that
Mhm.
every day, and then, Ryan Stegman's Venom run was pretty big for me because I love Ryan's art on that book. But yeah, going from there, and I've always been a big Spider-Man fan, even though I never really read the comics. But the first full run that I read was Ultimate Spider-Man. I think I read the whole thing in like 3 or 4 months. Um,
Wow, that's
yeah,
crazy.
I
That's like what,
was
100 or so issues?
160 issues. Yeah, I was into it.
160. I haven't
But
read that yet, but I know some Spider-Man fans think it's the best Spider-Man.
I
Is
am one
that
of those fans. I do
you
think
are?
is honestly, it might just be because I read it at the point in my life where I was the exact same age as him, so it
Hmm.
resonated with me. I think the best writer on Spider-Man is J. Michael Straczynski. His stuff
Hmm.
is really great, but as a total run and whole, I really like what Mark Bagley did with the character during that run.
Yeah,
So,
and that was Bendis too, right? Wasn't Did Bendis do that whole
oh
run?
yeah, I can't ever remember. I always remember the artist, but yeah, it's
Let me
Bendis.
see. Yeah, I know because I know Straczynski did do a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
I
Straczynski did Amazing Spider-Man. Yeah, I know that.
Oh, of course, I look it up. The show always takes priority. If you ever look up anything comically.
Yeah.
Yep, no, it was Bendis. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I thought always thought that was like a cool run. So that's what got you into it. But your first Spider-Man, because I'm gonna take a guess because my first exposure, I don't know if it was my first ever. I'm gonna say the 2000, what was it, 2002 movie? That was the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. That's still one of my favorite movies. Period. Was that your first
Hmm.
introduction to Spider-Man?
That was definitely my very, very first
Mm.
introduction when I was a lot younger, but I think
Or might have been
for me,
Spider-Man 2, actually, my first.
yeah, I remember Green Goblin, so I know it was Spider-Man 1,
Mm.
but the thing that really got me into Spider-Man when I got older was The Amazing Spider-Man actually with Andrew
I,
Garfield.
yeah, I remember
Yeah.
seeing that in theaters a few times actually. I really liked that one.
Me
It's
too.
weird. It's a mixed bag of a movie, I think.
Yeah.
But Same with the second one. The weird thing is the second one is a mess of a film, but there's some stuff I really like in there. But
Yeah.
there's some stuff that's just really, it's such a all over the place. But so okay, so you're into Spider-Man. Is he your favorite character?
He is my all-time favorite fictional character. So
Mhm. He's
yeah.
up there for me. I'd have to say for me, like Batman is my number one, but I love
Oh yeah,
Spider-Man. I love how relatable
definitely.
Spider-Man is. I love a supporting cast and his villains. I mean, it's hard not to love Spider-Man. Have you read any of the original Lee Ditko stuff?
I've read a little bit, yeah, and that's why I really like Andrew Garfield's because he really captures that sort of
Hmm.
angst and sort of cockiness that the
Yeah.
original Spider-Man has. That when you come up with Toby, people are like, "Oh, he's like a sweet,
Mhm.
high school kid," and then Andrew, everybody was kind of surprised because he's a little bit angstier. But that's the original. So
Yeah. No, people forget that too, that Peter could be a jerk sometimes.
yeah, I feel like he gets grouped into the Boy Scout
Mm-hmm.
group a lot with like Clark Kent and Steve Rogers, but he's really not at all because he's not naturally selfless. He's selfish, and then he has to overcome that and
Hmm.
overcome his human desires and try to be a hero.
I think that's what makes him such an endearing character too. Like I'm writing my own stuff with teenage superheroes, and that's like the dude. That is like some of the best stuff to pull from just character writing in general, but especially having a character. His origin is so great because it's such a great twist. The fact that he could have prevented it, it's so which is why I actually took issue. I love Tom Holland as an actor and whatever, but I took issue with them.
Hmm.
You don't have to even show it again, but pretty much changing the origin
Yeah.
because I feel like it's such a perfect origin story that it's like you shouldn't even touch it. But Spider-Man, I mean, he has some of the best villains and just everything. And yeah,
Oh
it's
yeah.
who's your favorite Spider-Man villain then?
Oh, it's definitely, well, I don't know if he's considered a villain anymore, but definitely Venom
Venom.
for sure.
See,
Um,
in you're a although Venom's technically 80s, isn't he? Late 80s or was he 90s?
pretty sure he's late 80s.
Yeah, but
He
it's
Todd
like
McFarlane created him either
yeah,
way,
and I
so
know that it's
yeah,
hard not to know the Todd Father.
yeah,
Yeah, I love. And then Bagley did Carnage, right?
yeah. Bagley
Yeah.
did Carnage, yeah.
Hmm.
But this is my hot take: is that I like Spider-Man's Rogue Gallery better than Batman's actually.
That's look, they're comparable. It's
I
totally
know.
fair. It's totally fair. I think they both have great rogues galleries, but I do want to ask because I see your art. Who are your artistic inspirations?
So it's definitely been a lot over the years, and it's constantly changing and updating. Um, David Finch is obviously a very huge one. He's the guy that kind of taught me most of what I know about comics and what resources to learn from. Ryan Stegman, I've actually had the pleasure to become pretty good friends with him, and he's been a great mentor because his art was a really big deal to me because it has the cartoonish foundations with the realistic rendering, which is really my favorite art style. And then Brett Booth, he's
Hmm.
a fantastic artist. Philip Tan, Jim Lee, of course, Mark Silvestri, Stephen Platt's a big one. I
Mm.
do enjoy Dale Keown and just a lot of the '90s guys. Todd McFarlane, how could I forget?
Yeah, the Image Boys. You a big Image guy then?
Oh yeah, huge image. The image revolution is like probably one of my favorite time periods in history, just
Oh yeah.
because of everything that went down during the early '90s and then continued into the later '90s. But yeah,
So who's your favorite of the Image Boys then?
oh definitely Todd.
Todd.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Todd's
yeah.
mindset is
He's a great
uncomparable.
businessman. He's
Exactly.
he's he's one of the best. I mean, because even just looking back, and I think people are really like people reference him so much, especially today. Now that we have crowd, I can't. It was much harder back then. It's easier now.
Oh yeah,
Not to say it's easy,
yeah,
um, but it's easier now. To do the indie stuff because you can just anyone can sit on their computer and if you have enough charisma, which McFarlane has, he probably would have had. Listen, if he was born later, he probably would have been on YouTube. He's got that charisma.
yeah.
But luckily he was earlier, so he, led the charge. And it's just everyone pulls from him because they're like, that's how I want to run a business.
Hmm.
I love that. I love that about Todd. And everyone I know, basically, for the most part, I've heard so many people just say great things about Todd as a
Oh
person.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm actually really excited because I'm having the opportunity to get my portfolio reviewed by him
Nice.
July 28th. So that's going to be pretty cool.
Oh, where? Which con? Are you going to a con or just?
No, they're doing it on Discord, actually.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that like a public thing, or is that just?
Yeah, you can join the Discord. It's called like the Odd Key Discord, but you can enter in your portfolio and get a chance to get reviewed by him. Luckily,
Hmm.
I know the guy personally, the guy that's choosing people. So he's like, yeah, we'll make sure to get you in there. So
That's awesome. All right, artists, if you're watching this, even if it's after the fact, if you want to get a portfolio review or even a chance of getting one from Todd McFarlane, definitely check that out. That's awesome. But let's pull up your campaign, man. I really want to talk about it, and I'm also curious as to how did you meet so many of these artists?
so my thing is that I actually started social marketing at a very young age. So around the age of 13, I was just making my rounds on, Reddit and Instagram, and
Mm-hmm.
I got in the ring and Twitter at age 15. And my thing is that I'll just reach out to anybody, even if the odds of them replying are very low, because you have absolutely nothing to lose if you try to reach out to a big artist that you're a fan of, and you tag them and they don't see it. You have lost absolutely nothing. But if
Mm-hmm.
they do see it and they do reply, then you've gained like everything. So just doing that on a consistent level, tagging my inspirations. Forgot to mention Joe Mad. He's another one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you get guys like Joe Mad, Joe Quesada, Brett Booth, Ryan Stegman, Brian Hitch. Lots of guys looked at my stuff and really sort of helped me out. And thanks to that, I sort of have a professional relationship with a lot of them now. So that's very cool.
That's awesome, man. I'm taking notes because I've been doing like never as consistently, but I've been running like doing YouTube for like more than 10 years, which is crazy. But just hearing it's crazy. I'm learning from you, man. I mean, you're so ahead of your age, 18. I mean, the stuff you've accomplished by your age is just unbelievable. And now you have a book out. So are you writing your book or
I am writing my book. Yeah.
that's awesome. So what got you into like would you see do you like to write or did you just choose to write this one just because you wanted?
Yeah. So actually, before I got into comics, I wanted to be an author. That was always a big passion of mine, and it was always something that I was pretty attuned to doing. Like whenever I'd be in a teacher's class or whatever, they'd be really impressed with my writing skills. So, I've never written for a comic before, so hopefully it's not trash. But we'll see because I got some really, really cool ideas, and everybody I've talked to about them so far has been interested. So,
Yeah, and it's weird. I don't know about like because I never really did novels and stuff. I guess I did short stories in class and whatever. And
right.
every time I got a creative opportunity, I pounced on that. But
Oh, yeah. Me
you know,
too.
I come from the film world, and they had a very, very strict screenwriting format. It's like you can't include this in a screenplay. You can't include this. Now, obviously, Quentin Tarantino, he doesn't give a shit about that. He'll include whatever he wants. But it's like
Right, right.
it was weird to me to I don't know if you felt this way going to comics and they straight up don't really have a format for scripts. Like I remember the first script I read I was editing for Chuck Dixon. And that was the first time I had ever laid eyes on a comic script. And then even like I bought a script from Peter Tomasi and the way he writes is totally different. Or you even have like things like Marvel Method. So like
Yeah.
how did you go about finding your own script and your own way
Oh
to write?
man, I'm crazy. So the thing with comics is that they have no rules, right? Essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So as an artist, I sort of do the Marvel way, but a little bit different. So what I do before I even really write stuff is that I'm a visual thinker, I'm a visual learner. So I thumbnail the entire book page by page and think about it visually. And then after I get all the pages penciled, I have a rough idea for what the dialogue is going to be like. So then I'll go back and put that in later. I do have the first like 5 pages dialogue figured out, but it should be pretty easy from that point because I'm so attuned with what I want this book to look and feel like that I can just continue on that path. Um, so yeah,
That's awesome. I know any artist, just you inherently have an advantage. I can't tell you how many times I've been like, "Is this too much for a page?" And I'll pull from my shelf. I'm like, Frank Miller did it. Oh no, but this person,
yeah,
you know, and it's like it's tough because
right.
you look at like Michael Turner's art. One thing I was shocked at is he can do. I don't know if because you mentioned '90s. I don't know if you mentioned Michael Turner.
Oh yeah, I love
Uh,
Michael Turner.
he like because I discovered Witchblade fairly recently, and just the way he's able to go from like like he'll do splash pages where it's like there's not even that much on the page, but you don't care because it's Michael Turner, so it's like whatever. Like, did that need to be a double page splash? Not really. Do I care? No, it looks good. And then he'll do those like million panels per page and have them still super detailed. And I'm like, how the hell did this guy do that? I mean, it's unbelievable.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm sure there's definitely the difficult part of being a writer is that you got to be able to cater to the artist for
Oh
sure,
yeah.
and realize their strengths and what they're good at and how they enjoy um, to work with a script. Because even when I worked with Dan and his writer, that was a new experience for me. Because any script that I had seen up to that point was completely different than what I got.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy, he's a fantastic writer, but this was originally for an actual like artist in the industry, but he wasn't able to do it. So they brought me on, and so basically they would write it. He wrote it in two-page format. So he would write a bunch of stuff that happened, and I would have to figure out how many panels to put on a page, how to frame everything, how to do the camera angles, and what to even split up between the two pages. So he would do page 1 and 2, and then write everything, page 3 and 4, and then write everything. So I had to figure that all out on my own, compared to like writers that will write panel 1, this happens, panel 2, this happens. So yeah, that was definitely a very fun experience, and I learned a lot, but it was also very difficult. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm always it's but like having that, I'm sure having both of those ends in you. I mean, that's just great. It's like talking to yourself. So
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
So it's like all consistent vision. So I want to talk about this now, Amarok. So what inspired you to do this? Do you want to pull the trailer up first, or do you want to talk about it first?
I'll talk about it first, and then we can watch the trailer. But the main thing that inspired Amarok is that I think as kids we sort of all create these stories for ourselves, and we'll create these different characters, and maybe they go nowhere. But in the case with Amarok, he's something that I created in middle school, and he was very very different when he started out. He still has like a few similarities and stuff, but as the years have progressed, I pretty much like revamped him once a year. Um, and I continually kept working on him and developing the plot and the world in my head, and I kept on coming up with new and newer ideas, to figure out what I was going to write about. And so I just kept going with that. And then the end of last year, I was like, okay, this is finally at a point where I'm ready to move forward and make a comic with it. Because before Dan had even hired me, I was like, oh, I'm going to start doing this now. But then Dan hired me, and so I wasn't able to. But I'm glad I didn't, because it was definitely a different thing back then, and I like where it's at much better now, and I feel a lot more confident in it. So
Mhm.
it's just been a very like organic build up over the years, and it's kind of cool because the character has grown and matured as I've grown as a person as well. So
That's awesome. Yeah, man. I mean, it's so fun finally being able to just get those big childhood ideas down. And that was one of the things that was like with film, it's more like you get the idea and then maybe maybe you'll be able to make it within the next 20 years. And I'm like, but I have like
yeah,
50 of them. And it's like,
yeah,
now you just as long as you could get an artist or be an artist, you got it. And that's just great, man. So
yeah. The only thing you need to get started with comics is a piece of paper and a pencil. So.
and skills, I would think,
Well, yeah,
which you
but
seem to have.
even to acquire skills, that's all you need to get started.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it you just need to add time to the list. So
Yeah. So, should I want to ask? Would you rather me play it first and then have you explain what the book's about, or?
yeah, you can play it first, and then I'll go
All
in
right.
more in depth.
Can everyone hear it? Let's see. Can you hear this?
I can hear it. Yeah.
Okay, because sometimes for some reason with Kickstarter, it doesn't play the music on my channel. I noticed, but ooh. Dude, even the logo is cool. Nice.
Thanks.
That's a
Yes.
good trailer too, man.
Thank you.
So I guess that answers one of my questions was going to be if you were going to also launch on other platforms, but I guess that answers that question.
Well, yeah, it's only on Indiegogo for now, but I might consider, fund my comic or Kickstarter later. But at
Yeah.
the moment, it's only on Indiegogo.
Yeah, you got to start on one,
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're at like 5% on 5 different.
So yeah, the cool thing about the logo is that Rob Willis did a cover for it, but he was also kind enough to also design the logo along with it, and I think it's the coolest logo I've ever seen in my life.
An awesome logo. I've been doing logos myself, and it's there's so much of an art to it, and that one is awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just staring at your logo, man. But so John Livesay, you've got so many people. So is John Livesay inking you then?
Yeah, John Livesay or Live. I don't know.
Is it Livesay?
I think it's Livesay. When people say it, most people say Livesay. When I talk to him, he says Livesay.
Okay, then I guess it's Livesay. Well, if he says it, Although
Yeah.
occasionally I have met people that like people pronounce their name wrong, so they start introducing themselves with the wrong pronunciation. I'm like, no, you gotta correct it.
Yeah.
But I guess it is Livesay. Okay.
So he was actually there at like almost the start of Image. He's been in the business for 30 years. Inking over guys like, Mark Silvestri, all sorts of guys. He even inked over Michael Turner once, but
yeah, I got something signed by him.
Michael. Yeah. So yeah, he's been in the business for 30 years, so he's gonna make my little scribbles look pretty gnarly. And then awesome. We got Andrew Dollhouse on colors, if anybody knows him. He's done stuff for Marvel and DC. He was a big guy with Brett Booth. They worked together very, very well. So yeah, he colored the Rob Willis and the Keenan White cover. So
yeah, you got. I mean, look at how many covers. Let's see. I'll scroll through it. How many covers you got? I was impressed by that too.
Yeah. So far we've got
Rob Willis.
Yeah, we've got 4, and then we've got 4 in the black and white, and we should be adding another one at some point. Maybe when the campaign is closer to closing or something. We'll see. But yeah.
Yeah, it's just you've got like a murderer's row of talent working for you. That's awesome. Eric Weathers letters like everything.
Yeah, I noticed that. He's like the guy.
I've seen his name on so many stuff. I'm sure if there's a con, I could probably, because I don't know, I should probably pay more attention. Oh, look at you putting the letter on the front. Maybe I should do that for mine too. I feel like people overlook. Yeah. I remember doing a poll on my Twitter where I was like, who are the unsung heroes of comics? And it was like inkers, colorists, editors, letterers. And it was like letterers like clearly won. Like everyone was like, yeah, no, they're the most unsung.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I mean, the thing with inkers that's like annoying is when people are like, well, don't they just trace the lines?
That's what I used to think too. I was like, they just add ink.
And it's completely different because they're like it's like they're drawing over the lines. And especially when I'm working on my pages with John, I'm usually a very, very tight penciler, but I've been loosening up to let him do his own thing with stuff. So
yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about that they're like inkers will say, hey, can you loosen up? I've heard people talk about that. I also, it wasn't until I'm working on a comic where I had a different penciler and inker that I've read hundreds of comics, but it's not until you're part of that creative process that you really understand as it's coming together what each person adds. And I think that's really cool. Even down to the flatter, I'm like, oh, so this is.
Oh yeah, yeah.
This is so. Yeah. So what is your book about? We've talked about the look of it. It's a really dope looking book, but what's it about, man?
A shirtless guy in a cape running around on magic drugs. So, Amarok is an epic fantasy that takes place thousands of years into the future. Um, so essentially, think this Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones style fantasy world evolving into a Blade Runner setting
Oh, that's
and
sick.
time period. And so, what would that kind of look like? And so, the main thing is that magic always plays a massive role in these sort of movies and books and stuff. So, what you notice with the real world is that we're constantly industrializing, we're constantly
Oh,
natural resources
oh,
that we
sorry to cut
have.
off for a second.
Oh, sorry.
All
But
right, is that just me? I don't know. Chat, let me know. Anyway,
I
I'm
don't
sorry.
know. But like
Constantly natural resources. Okay.
abusing natural
Hmm.
resources, yeah. So in my idea, it's like, what if a civilization were to try and do that to magic? Now the
Mm.
idea that this magic is very sacred and that it's sort of sentient, it would not allow itself to be taken advantage of. So what happens is that it starts fighting back. The trees start mutating and the animals start mutating until the land becomes uninhabitable, and mankind has to sort of sanction off into different sections, and they build up these magic force fields to protect themselves from the outside world. So within the cities, magic has become a synthetic drug that they've sort of combined science and magic together and taken advantage of it to make it into this synthetic thing that once injected, it will affect each user differently depending on their blood type and DNA makeup, giving them a different set of abilities and powers. And so sort of become like this big hot thing on the black market, very, very rare and hard to get a hold of. But clearly, Amarok has gotten a hold of it here. And so for him, for example, it turns his blood into an energy source to power ancient artifacts such as his arm. Um, and so the book opens up, and very quickly you realize what kind of character he is, because he's not quite the um, the morally correct vigilante that you think he is in the very beginning. So
Dude, that's really cool shit, man. I mean, I just the way you talk about it, you're clearly a writer, because a lot of the time there will be I mean, even Image, most of those guys, they know it as the artist era, but just the way you construct your world. Blade Runner meets fantasy is such a unique
yeah,
premise, too. Let me ask you a question, because you talk about them using like comparing the environment to like magic and like sentient life and like, I guess like corporations or just humanity
mm-hmm.
taking that. Have you ever played Final Fantasy VII?
I have not. I don't
Okay.
even have like a gaming console or anything, but the Final Fantasy games do look pretty fun. But yeah,
Yeah. I was gonna say it's nerd shit, but we're talking about comic books. You know what I mean?
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's because I played the original and then I played remake. But like the original, even if I know turn-based combat and random counters isn't for everyone, but the storytelling is so brilliant, and a lot of what you described, I think that story at very least, it's it's weird because it's like if you don't like games, I don't know, that's the best way to experience the story, but the story is like right up your alley, and it's like I'm
Yeah.
seeing similarities, and that's great because it's considered one of the best video game stories ever, which I think it is.
Yeah,
But
for sure. That is definitely the interesting thing is whenever I'll like show people Amarok or tell them stuff about Amarok, they're like, "Oh, that reminds me of this." And I'm
mhm,
like, "I have never heard of that in my life or experienced that in any form."
mhm.
So it's kind of cool to see that it gets like I'm on the same wavelength with different creators that I haven't even,
Yeah,
consumed any of their content before. But yeah.
I mean it's a great lives think of like now this one. Now that I know you're such a big Spider-Man fan, I totally see it in this. I mean, I know it's not,
Yeah.
but it almost
Yeah.
looks like what that's like a Spider-Man pose. I
Yeah,
like
for
it. It's
sure. Yeah, he's sort of so the idea, if I can expand a little bit more on the story idea
no, go
here,
ahead.
is that a lot of times you see in dystopian films or stories like that, there's always the sort of idea that the rich people live among the clouds and the poor people are
Hmm.
left on the ground levels to sort of
Yep.
grovel beneath everybody. But for Amarok, I wanted to flip that on its head quite literally, to the point where the upper levels have become uninhabitable because they're sort of poisonous. The atmosphere is a bit toxic, and it's a lot more difficult to live up there. And so and even taking economy out of it completely, I decided to not make it economically based, but rather the idea of sort of a communist society versus a free society living sort of together. So the idea is that the government has said basically, you can live on the bottom of the city for free, but you have to do everything we tell you to. You have to work the jobs we tell you to and stay in line at all times. And you essentially have very limited freedoms. Now, if you want freedoms, you're completely allowed to move to the upper levels of the city, but it's pretty much overrun by gangs and, it's a lot harder to inhabit. But you do have that sense of freedom up there that you're not going to get down lower. So the idea is that all these sort of tribes and clans, as they progressed into the future, they've essentially been almost belittled down to gangs, but there's still those sort of very tribal traditions among them all. So that's why they choose to live up there. And Amarok was a part of one of these gangs, so you'll get to learn a lot about that as the series continues forward.
And so is this like I know there was a page of him. This is a mask, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, I was wondering about that. Yeah, that's really cool. So how much like do you just want to keep most of the character in mystery? Or
It's not a massive deal to me. For me, the main thing is like, you know, for me, I really enjoyed the first 3 episodes of Mandalorian season 1, where it sort of told you his story progressively through flashbacks.
yeah.
And that's sort of what I want to do through Amarok because he's had a very, very troubled past. You realize very quickly, I mean, this is a little bit spoilery, but you realize very quickly he's a schizophrenic, he has PTSD, and he's on drugs. So he's an absolute madman, essentially. But as the series goes on, you sort of get to realize what happened to him in his past, and he's definitely haunted by some demons from his past. Um, and yeah, you'll get to experience that as the story goes on. And I'm not being very very open with him. You have to experience because I want the reader to constantly not exactly be sure of who he is or why he's doing this, and sort of have that organic build up to just learning little bit by little bit more about him as you can kind of piece it together as the series moves forward. So
good shit, man. This is all. I mean, just I'm really excited for this story now, especially just the way you describe it. It's such a unique character, unique setup, location, and I mean the style is great too. Do you pull from The Darkness at all?
a little bit, but not like a ton. I've actually just been reading it just now because I realized it's very similar in terms of the vibes to Amarok. It's a very similar art style. And that I'm actually like, turns out that I'm leaning towards Mark Silvestri even more than I thought I was. Especially with John Livesey on inks, really has that scissor cross hatching going on. But yeah, so I've been looking into that as I've been working on the book, but it wasn't really a thing that was on my radar beforehand. But yeah.
It's really good shit, man. So this is going to be fun. How many pages is it?
So the first book is just going to be 32 pages because, highly detailed art, and I'm paying, an inker and a colorist, pretty much industry rates. So we really want to make sure that we can deliver the best product that we can. And I really honestly don't think there's going to be another book on the market like this at the moment that has this really intense detail that, I mean, it really is like the book of 1,000 lines. So, definitely you're getting your bang for your buck with each page that we're doing here. And then one other thing that I was going to bring up was that Amarok is actually an Inuit Native American word, and it's essentially in their mythology, it's this giant lone wolf that hunts unsuspecting prey that wanders alone at night, which sort of is an allegory for what Amarok does. And even the story as a whole, you often see Cyberpunk and Blade Runner as very Japanese inspired,
Mm-hmm.
but I wanted Amarok to be very Native American inspired instead.
Oh, that's cool.
So, the idea is that in the story, the Amarok is this sort of legend and this myth that they have. And so for the past 5 years, these different soldier patrols that just go along on the city, they've been disappearing, and nobody knows why or how because nobody really lives to tell the tale. So they've been, sort of spreading this. The legend of the Amarok has come to kill them all essentially. So nobody really knows what he is because you know, they don't know if he's a man or a beast or anything because nobody's seen him before. But yeah, so sort of has that. He's like the boogeyman of the city essentially.
That's cool. You know, it's funny how your favorite is Spider-Man, mine's Batman, but you're the one who's doing more of like the
Yeah, the
Batman kind of
Batman.
style book.
Yeah.
Now I'm the one doing the teenage. I don't know, but that's really interesting. I mean, this is such a cool character design too.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So
Um,
he's okay. So that's yeah. I'm just all right. So he's Native American. That's cool.
yeah.
Or
That's the thing
is
with
he
like the
American? Because you said it's a fantasy world. So is it like
well,
American, or is it just like he looks like he would be,
it's
kind
the
of like how
idea it's the idea in Star Wars that there's African Americans, but there's
right
no Africa in Star
or
Wars
America?
or America.
Yeah,
So
or
it's the
like Lord
same
of the
thing
Rings, how
here.
they're all
He's
like European, but there's no
yeah,
Europe.
he's Native American, but there's no America in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
world. It's entirely its own thing, for sure. And then that's the other thing is that starting out with the story, he comes off as very Batman, Spawn, or Punisher, but then you very quickly realize by page 8 that he's, or I don't know if it might be like page 10. I don't know, that he's not like those characters at all,
Hmm.
like how you thought he was. But in the very beginning, he looks very similar. So the thing with Amarok is that it's a book that constantly subverts expectations of what you're expecting from the story to go in the direction that it's going to go. So,
That's even within this, you've subverted my like fantasy. Okay, Blade Runner. Like just the way you're talking about the character already has me so engaged. Because it's funny because I go in, I wasn't even I was pretty sure you were writing it, but I wasn't fully sure. But I had no idea you wanted to be an author. And just hearing the way you talk, you have a clear understanding of storytelling and how long. So you mentioned you wanted to be an author, but how long have you been drawing then?
well, really quickly, that's one thing that I wanted to bring up is that everybody sort of, when I come on, they're like, oh, yeah, this guy's a good artist. But whenever artists tend to write their own stuff, it's really not usually the best
Hmm.
because they're mainly focused on art. And so they don't exactly know how to write. So it is definitely sort of like this underdog thing where I have to sort of prove myself as a writer because I've already proved myself as an artist. So
Hmm.
hopefully with this book, I can prove myself as a writer. But I really started taking drawing very seriously when I was 14, so around the seventh grade. And then I took comics seriously because at first I wanted to be a concept artist. I started taking comics seriously when I was 15. And so it's been about, 3 years. But obviously before that, I drew a fair amount, but I never really took it that seriously. I just drew on and off. I doodled in my school sketchbooks and stuff like that. But
So wait, you started drawing comic art when you were 14 and you had your first job when you were how old?
no, I started training for comics when I was 15. And then I think Dan hired me near the end of the time I was 16, and then I started working for him when I was 17.
Holy shit. Hang on. So for that whole year, were you just like cuz was this during quarantine when you No, it wasn't,
Hmm.
right? It hasn't been that long. What has it?
Yeah, it
How
was
long
during
has it been?
quarantine.
Jeez.
Yeah, 3 years. It's been 3 years.
It, yeah, there goes 3 years of my life. Yours too. Well, I feel bad for you especially. But so I guess you were at home drawing a lot.
All the time. Yeah, and it was great because I didn't have any friends, so I could just spend all day drawing.
It
Um,
paid off, man. This is crazy. Can't believe that, man. So, okay, did you like what were your like where'd you learn to draw? Did you watch videos? Because obviously you didn't go to arts. The fact that you never
yeah.
went to art school, by the way, is crazy too. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, I went to like a
well, you're too
Yeezy,
young,
a
It's
redneck school. Art was not taken importantly at all, but just in the general high school. But yeah, so the cool thing about the digital age is that everything you could possibly need to learn is online at the grasp of your fingertips or touch of your fingertips. I don't know what I'm talking about. Sometimes I like to use random words. um, but yeah, really. So started off with a bunch of different art YouTubers that I thought were cool, like ZHC before he completely lost it. David Finch, Proco, Jazza was like the first one when I was really just starting out. But yeah, and then after that, sort of becoming really obsessed with David Finch, and luckily he's very open about how he learned how to do it. So just picking up different books like Michael Hampton's book, George Bridgman's book, and studying from books, and then always being open to learning from anyone and everyone that I thought had cool art, and always being open to critiques from people that I respected. That's always my thing. Is that I love when people that know what they're doing critique me. It's very annoying when people that have no clue what they're doing critique me, because it's like, and this is just a rule of thumbs that I have for artists is like, if you don't want to draw like the person critiquing you, don't take a critique from them, because ultimately, if that's not the direction you're going for, now obviously if they're like a pro, they usually have a very broad understanding. But if it's just like a nobody on Twitter with like 5 followers and no, like, nothing to show for it, then, they might know what they're talking about, especially if you're just starting out, but it can be very overwhelming for me, especially because I always had such a wide range of people seeing my stuff that you start to realize who is critiquing you and who is just trying to make you draw like how they wish you would draw. So yeah, but just, always trying to reach out to artists and learn from everything. I mean, you really got to be hungry for this stuff and just be able to seek it out yourself. And there's no really linear way to follow it. Like, there's no step one, you do this, step two, you do this. It's all a very organic thing, because obviously with art there is so much to learn. You got to learn anatomy, perspective, figure drawing, gesture drawing, lighting, framing, details, perspective. I think I already said that one, but all sorts of stuff. So being able to learn from all sorts of different resources. I mean, obviously the best book to start out with is How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
I got that right here, and then I never used it.
Yeah, but that has a very broad roadmap that is a good method for learning, for sure. But yeah, David Finch has a great roadmap on his website as well. So
maybe I should actually start using this, even if just, I don't know.
Yeah, just to play around with it. I mean, that's the thing about an artist. If you're a writer and you learn how to draw, you're intrinsically going to understand artists like even better. So I mean, that's like the common joke is that writers will say, "Yeah, there's 1,000 soldiers coming over the mountain," and then the writer and they wrote that in like 7 seconds, and the writer has to spend like 7 days drawing.
The artist,
that.
yeah, they have to, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so
I've thought of that too. I remember the first time I was like, they were like, "You realize like how many guns I have to draw per soldier, how many attachments, and all that."
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, that's 100% true. It's 100% true. Yeah, I mean, this is so good. And so I wanted to ask, what made you decide you wanted to get an inker instead of inking yourself?
For me, I want to give the best product that I can. And if you scroll down a little bit to the black and white covers, I can ink myself, but it's just not something I'm as confident doing if you keep going down. And I really just like what John brings to the table.
Which one? This one? Which one?
The second one. That's the one. Yeah, that's my own work that I inked. And there's probably not like a huge noticeable difference to people, but for me, I just really like the cleanliness that John offers, and he's just so much. He has such a steadier hand that he throws much cleaner lines than me, and I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, so I really wanted to make sure I'm delivering the best product that I can. So anywhere that I'm sort of slacking, John really can pick up for me and make it look even better. So.
Looks great, man. That looks so cool.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. So, and the colors too. You just, I know. Well, most artists typically don't color their own stuff.
Yeah.
So you got Kanan. I mean, this is just great, man. You've got this many covers, 32 pages. I mean, the detail on all these is insane. How far into it are you?
For me, penciling, I'm about a third of the way through right now because I didn't want to get like too far, just in case we didn't reach our goals. But we did. Yeah, I'm gonna keep keep working on it and keep everybody updated. And John is going to be able to get back to inking starting next week. We just had a phone call today, so yeah. If anybody's interested, you can back the book. The thing that I've been saying is I get so used to saying sign up when I was doing the pre-sign up campaign. It's like back it with your money. So yeah, that's you know.
Oh yeah, it's there's so much good stuff here, and I wanted to ask. Okay, so you've got all this stuff, right? So this says Emrock, but it sounds to me like this is with all the world building you've done, which I imagine took a lot of time and all of that.
Yeah.
How long? Like, are you? This is, I assume, is issue 1, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, are you planning on keeping this going for a while, or?
This is the same idea as Spawn, that it can literally last forever.
Okay.
So I have everything mapped out broadly to the point where I have the the first story arc that's going to be like, like a classic 6, maybe 10. We could make it a very big story arc, maybe 8 issues for story arc number 1. And then after that, it can continue on for pretty much forever. And then we can obviously have spin-offs and branch off and all that kind of stuff. Now, issue 1 is a very character-centered issue. It's focused on Amrock and his inner monologue, so it's very similar to Frank Miller's writing, Donny Cates' writing, if you're into that stuff. Very much, because in my opinion, comics are like the best medium to have that inner thought and that inner dialogue, because even with like books, which you do it there, it's impossible to show an action and a thought at the exact same time. If you're having a character thinking, they can't just be going around doing stuff. In comics, they can be thinking one thing and then jumping around the city or killing people or whatever, and it can be 2 different storytelling going on at once, which for me is the biggest appeal for comics in general. So this issue story number 1 is very much focused around what's going on in his head, because the plot is actually fairly simple, but the characters the very complex part. And I find that a lot of stories that have a nice simple plot and then have an amazingly complex story, or not story, complex characters, tend to make the best storylines.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you too on the way you could use captions or thought bubbles and juxtapose like an action with that, like having 2 different bits of information, or even just transitioning things. There again, going back to like when you write in different mediums or just in any way, you really start to appreciate. You learn the limitations. You're like, oh man, I can't do this, but I can do this that I can't do. And it changes the way you look at storytelling. It's like you have a different, my brain thinks of a comic book when I'm doing a comic book script very differently than a film script, for that, in large part because of that reasons. And also things like page turns, utilize every aspect of the medium. And it sounds like you got a strong grasp of that.
For sure.
I'm just kind of in awe at what you've accomplished, man. This is just crazy. And I think everyone is too. Everyone's like, dude, are you seeing this? I forget who, but I've heard people go like, this 18-year-old. I remember I first saw that. It's crazy. So you pulled from a lot of the 90s stuff.
Yeah.
And it seems like, so I asked your favorite artist, but I guess you kind of answered, but I'll ask, well, what are your favorite writers then? Your favorite writers. They don't have to just be comics, by the way, just in general.
All right. So my favorite, I really love my favorite like creative person is really George Lucas, actually. I love his world building and what he was able to accomplish and his outlook on life and his philosophies and everything like that. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of Frank Miller. I really enjoy a lot of Donny Cates stuff. Donny Cates has, he can do some really, really good books, and then he can do some kind of funky books. But I really enjoyed his stuff on Venom. J. Michael Straczynski is great. Chris Claremont, of course. Obviously Stan the Man. I actually don't remember like a ton of like writers' names off the top of my head, but when I was a kid, I was really into Aragon with Christopher Poloni. J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, those guys are always fantastic. Um,
Seems like you
but
pull from like everywhere.
yeah,
Really,
my thing
this sounds
is
like.
always being very, very open to just everything. Like even in my like belief system is always like, you know, always trying to understand people's perspectives from where they're coming from.
Hmm.
Even if I don't agree with it at all, I still want to be open enough to see, why do you think this or why do you think that? Because essentially the whole human experience is that your entire belief system is built up of every insignificant or significant experience that you've ever had in your entire life. So that completely changes your worldview, which is why people can have such differing belief systems. And if you
Hmm.
only stay in like one place, like if you only stay in a little town, then you can just kind of soak up that belief system rather than figuring it out on your own.
Hmm.
And critical thinking is always like a huge deal to me, and always trying to rationalize and reason with what I think about things. So
Definitely. I mean, and it all shows too. Again, the blending of genres. And you mentioned Blade Runner too. I remember seeing Blade Runner 2049 in theaters. I love that. I mean, I've seen the first Blade Runner, of course, too.
yeah,
Um, have you ever seen the original ending to Blade Runner?
I have not
It's
actually. I've
not
been
good.
meaning to check that out, but yeah, I've heard it's not good. So I'm like, what's the point? But
It, yeah,
Blade Runner 2049, in my opinion, is the absolute best Blade Runner thing.
I agree.
And it's definitely like our generation's Blade Runner. So when the first Blade Runner came out, it was such a monumental film for that time period. And so what the new one has done is that it has related to our generation on a different level as well, just like the first one did, but obviously in a completely different way because the times have changed and different
Mm,
stuff like that. But just the whole thing that they sort of did with the chosen one trope and how they completely flipped it on its head,
mhm.
that was a huge inspiration for Amarok. So
Oh yeah, that. Oh, that's interesting. That I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, I mean, I think I remember it was a movie where the credits rolled. My friends like, "You ready to go?" And I remember just sitting there, just kind of my jaw on the floor. I mean,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just visually that is I still think that's probably the most beautiful movie I've ever seen. The original is beautiful in its own way too. It
oh
is
for
well not
sure,
just in its own way, it
for
is
sure.
beautiful. Um I love this the second one though, man. It was so that was easily and also the fact that it wasn't nominated for best picture. I was like, "Okay, come
Yeah,
on."
yeah,
Ridiculous. People are like, "Oh, it got all the technical awards." I'm like, "No, it deserved more than that." Because I watched a
yeah.
lot of the other best picture nominees and I'm like, "Really? Some of
I
those are
mean,
better than Blade Runner?"
sadly, Blade Runner is not a film for general audiences, which makes up like 80% of
Neither are most
moviegoers.
Oscar movies, though. Like, let's
Yeah,
be
but but
honest. Yeah,
but then the other thing is that it has that like huge budget and it's not super like niche. So it's like in a weird like middle ground where they're
excuses,
like,
excuses.
no, I'm just saying why they don't want to do that. I think
Yeah,
they're really stupid, but they always like
yeah. It was so good, man. I love that movie. So we've got so many blending of genres. Kick-ass art, a million reasons to back this campaign. Um, but if you were to sum it up, like what would you say you're doing with your comic that no one else is? Or like what's one of the reasons for people that are on the fence or whatever that you should absolutely back this book?
well, if you think the art looks stupid and the story looks horrible, you will actually have a chance to win the original David Finch cover, the art of that. If you back the project, you'll be entered into a raffle so that when the campaign is not live anymore, I'll do a generator and it'll choose a backer ID number, and whoever gets that will win the original David Finch art. Um, Other than that, call me cocky, but I don't see a reason why you wouldn't want to back this, other than being low on money. But if anybody has any questions or anything, you can ask in the chat. But this is a comic that is filled to the brim with detail every single page, and it's not something that I'm rushing out or just doing a product. It's coming from my soul and my heart, and I'm putting everything that I have into it and into the story as well. And I'm really hoping that I can deliver a product that deeply resonates with people and can even inspire them in their own right to continue to create stories, because stories are the fundamentally most important thing that we as humans have to offer, I believe. and I really want to capture that essence and energy with Amarok.
That's such a perfect answer. Shit, man, you got all the good ones, and you've got 5 splash pages here
Yeah, as of now, I might even add more, but
and 3 double page. So that's how much your book.
there's a lot of splashes. Yeah, but
Nice.
even with the double page spread, there's still like storytelling going on with like the panels
Oh
and
yeah,
stuff, and
there's good reasons to use them. I
yeah,
remember
one
in my
of
script I was debating for a while, and that's going to be a conversation with my artist where it's like double page splash. Am I overusing them, or are they actually?
for my thing, it's like I just want this book to come like at your face and just
Oh
be
yeah.
in your face all the time and constantly, have new stuff. So even one of the splash pages is more of a collage page where there's just like no panels, but it's still considered a splash.
Oh okay.
So, but yeah, the original art is very, kind of pricey, but if you do have deep pockets, definitely something to look into. I was
These are
really
going to go up in
surprised
value, by the way. These
that
are
yeah, thank you. That somebody actually already bought the cover that I did. So
yeah.
that's pretty cool. But yeah, for sure.
That's dope, man. And do you draw physically or do you use digital?
So I do this thing that is Dan Fraga does it as well, and Ryan Stegman does it. We call it tradigital. So what you actually do is so I'll do a little thumbnail on a piece of paper, and then I'll take a picture of that on my iPad. I'll import it into Procreate, and then I will do a digital layout on that. So I'll get everything situated to where I need it. You can resize things and change things around if it's not going well at first, which is so much more advantageous than doing it on paper, because it's like if you draw a head too big, you got to erase it and redraw it. On Procreate, you can just make it smaller. And so what I do after I get the layout finished is that I'll actually print it out on 11 by 17 Bristol board, and I will pencil directly on top of that blue line with a physical pencil. So all the finished art is completely traditional.
Gotcha. That's
Yeah.
cool, man. That's really cool. All the finished art is completely. That's okay. So you're getting finished art if you
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. All the
Which
pages will
looks cool.
be fully inked by John Livesey.
Mhm.
So I'm not just going to sell you a pencil page for that price. We'll have it fully inked up, and they'll look even cooler because you can even see with the third splash page, it's just, has so much more contrast to it. So, and yeah, David Finch is he's still working on that cover. He's been really busy, but there is a work in progress pick of it up on the perks, but obviously the final one is going to be fully finished and colored and everything. So
That's cool, man. This is all so cool. Everyone, make sure to check it out. Before we wrap up, do you have anything else you want to mention or anything?
yeah, I'm sure there's like links in the chat that you can check it out.
Yeah,
The
I'll post it
support
again.
the support so far has been absolutely wonderful. If anybody has any questions or comments they want to make, feel free to do that. I'm always open to pretty much anything. And this is definitely a huge passion project of mine. So it would mean the world to me if you checked it out and were interested in it.
You heard that, guys. Everyone, make sure to check out this book, and also make sure to follow him on all the socials. I mean, that's how I found you, and it
Yeah,
seems to me like I'm not alone in that. It seems like tons of people found you. You're
for
great at
sure,
networking
for
too.
sure.
So let's see. I'm posting your Twitter, and then do you have a link tree or something? Or
No, actually, I'm just sort of on Twitter and Instagram. I think I'm gonna start. I should start a YouTube channel and a Patreon
Mhm.
and stuff like that. But for now, I'm just focusing on getting this book done. So
No, yeah, I feel that. I
yeah,
understand that.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Everyone, make sure to check this out. And I'm going to be having a guest next week. I'm just solidifying the details, but stay tuned for the next episode of Vaughn Coleman Presents. Subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure to check out Josh, check out his campaign, and I'll see you guys next time. So until then, peace out. Have a
See
good
ya.
one.